The most dangerous sentence in the plug-in solar market might be one of the simplest. Just plug it into the wall. Because that sentence can describe something as harmless as charging a portable power station. Something completely different like a balcony solar system feeding electricity into your home, or an emerging class of batteries that can actually send electricity back through the house wiring. And those are not the same thing. In fact, one of the biggest problems with this market right now is that several very different technologies are being sold under almost identical language. Plug-in solar, balcony solar, plug-in batteries, solar batteries, portable power stations, home backup batteries, and even whole home systems. So before you buy one, there are some questions you need answered. Not the obvious questions about whether an 800-watt panel produces 800 watts all day. Most buyers already understand that. The more interesting questions are what happens when you pull the plug while the system is generating, whether the electricity can travel backwards through your household wiring, what protects a utility worker during a blackout, whether the system can actually run your refrigerator or air conditioner, and whether the money you save on electricity will ever justify what you spend on the battery. Because a product can work exactly as advertised and still be completely wrong for your house. So here are 25 things I think you should know before buying plug-in solar or a plug-in battery. Is this actually a grid-connected generator, or is it just a battery plugged into an appliance? This distinction is so important that it should probably be the first thing you ask. When you see a battery being plugged into a normal wall outlet, it is easy to assume that the battery is doing something unusual. But if the battery is plugged into the wall simply to charge itself, that is completely ordinary. Power stations have been doing that for years. The interesting technology is when the direction of electricity changes. Instead of electricity traveling from the wall into the battery, the system can potentially take stored energy and send electricity back out through an approved connection to supply household loads. And then there is another category entirely, a portable battery that simply has an AC outlet on the front. In that case, the electricity may never enter your house wiring at all. You plug your refrigerator, laptop, or other appliance directly into the battery. Those systems can look almost identical in an online advertisement. So before you even look at battery capacity, ask a much simpler question. Where does the electricity actually go when the battery is discharging? Balcony solar has become a category of its own. If you start researching this market, especially in Europe, you will quickly encounter the term Balkenkraftwerk. It literally refers to a small, balcony power plant. And in Germany, the more formal term is Steckersolargerät. These systems have become one of the most visible examples of consumer-scale plug-in solar because they allow apartment residents and people without conventional rooftops to generate some of their own electricity. That is important because it tells us something about the real market opportunity. Plug-in solar is not necessarily trying to replace a 10-kilowatt rooftop system. For many people, it is solving a different problem. I live in an apartment. I rent. I have a balcony. I cannot install a conventional solar system. Can I still generate some of my own electricity? That is where balcony solar makes much more sense. A battery can be connected to solar without actually being a home battery. This is another marketing trap. Some systems allow solar panels to charge the battery directly. Others take electricity from an existing solar system through AC coupling. Some can charge from the grid. Some can do all three. For example, Zendure's SolarFlow 2400 AC Plus is an AC-coupled storage system designed to work with existing solar installations rather than simply having solar panels plugged directly into the battery. Zendure describes the system as a way to capture surplus PV electricity and store it rather than exporting that energy to the grid. That distinction matters because the architecture determines where the conversion losses occur, what equipment you need, and what the battery can actually do. So when someone says, "This is a solar battery," that is not enough information. You need to know how the solar reaches the battery and how the battery gets electricity back to the house. Does it power the house or only the appliance connected to it? This was one of the best comments on our previous video. Someone pointed out that a product like Pila can look like a revolutionary home energy system when, depending on the configuration, the practical experience may be much closer to having a sophisticated UPS for an appliance. And that criticism deserves to be taken seriously. If you plug the battery into the wall and then plug your refrigerator into the battery, the refrigerator can be powered. But that does not automatically mean the battery is powering every socket in your house. There is a huge difference between powering an appliance and energizing household wiring. If you want the latter, the system needs an architecture specifically designed and approved for that purpose. That distinction alone can completely change whether a product is useful to you. Can it actually run the appliances you care about? This is where product specifications become much more interesting. Suppose a battery says it contains 2,000 watt-hours of energy. That sounds impressive until you discover that its inverter can only deliver 500 watts continuously. You might have enough stored energy to theoretically run something for hours, but you cannot necessarily connect a 2,000 watt appliance to it. And the opposite problem exists too. A battery may have a powerful inverter but insufficient capacity to run the appliance for very long. This is why power and energy are different measurements. Watts tell you how quickly electricity can be delivered. Watt-hours tell you how much energy is stored. So when you are looking at a battery, never stop at the big number on the box. Ask, how many watts can it deliver and for how long? The inverter's startup surge may matter more than its headline wattage. A refrigerator is a perfect example. It might consume relatively little electricity while running, but its compressor can demand considerably more power when it starts. Water pumps and air conditioners can have an even more demanding startup. So a battery advertising 2,000 watts does not necessarily mean it can comfortably start every appliance that normally consumes less than 2,000 watts. You need to look at the continuous output and the surge rating, and you also need to know how long that surge capability actually lasts. A product page that gives you battery capacity but hides the inverter's startup capability is leaving out one of the numbers that matters most. How long will it actually run your appliance? This is where you can do a little maths instead of trusting the marketing department. A simplified runtime calculation is: runtime is almost equal to usable battery capacity times inverter efficiency divided by appliance power. Imagine you have a battery with 1,000 watt-hours of usable energy and an inverter that is 90% efficient. If your appliance consumes 100 watts continuously, the theoretical runtime would be approximately 1,000 times 0.90 divided by 100 is equal to 9 hours. What happens during a blackout? This is where the entire conversation changes. A normal grid-connected solar inverter is generally designed to shut down when the grid disappears. That behavior is not a defect. It is a safety feature. The reason is simple. If utility workers believe the local grid is de-energized, they need to know that distributed generators are not continuing to feed electricity into the network. This is known as anti-islanding. So if you have solar panels connected to a normal grid-tied inverter and the electricity goes out, you cannot simply assume that your solar panels will continue powering your house. If you want solar plus battery backup during an outage, you need a system capable of creating a safe electrical island for the home and preventing that island from feeding the utility network. Backfeeding is not a theoretical problem. This was another criticism from the comments that I think deserves much more attention. Someone asked, essentially, what stops this battery from sending electricity backwards through the house wiring and back onto the grid? That is the right question, because the danger is not necessarily that the homeowner touches a socket and gets electrocuted. The more serious concern is what happens upstream. During an outage, a utility worker may assume that a section of the network is dead. If a distributed generator continues energizing that network unexpectedly, the worker could be exposed to a voltage they were not expecting. That is why anti-islanding exists. And it is why you should be suspicious of any product that treats plug it into a wall socket and power your house, as if that were no different from plugging in a toaster. It isn't. Do not confuse normal export with dangerous outage backfeed. There is another subtle point here. Exporting electricity to the grid during normal operation is not inherently the same thing as dangerous backfeeding during a blackout. A certified grid-connected inverter is specifically designed to synchronize with the grid and operate under defined conditions. When the grid disappears, it should detect that condition and disconnect appropriately. The problem is not simply that electricity can travel backwards. The problem is uncontrolled electricity traveling into infrastructure that is supposed to be de-energized. That is why the certification and control architecture matter. What exact certification does the product have? Do not be satisfied when a seller says something like designed to meet UL standards, built to European standards, or puts a certification logo on the product page. Ask for the exact standard, certificate, test report, model number, and issuing body. The question is not whether the manufacturer says its technology is safe. The question is whether the exact equipment you are buying has actually been evaluated under the requirements that apply to the installation you intend to make. For grid-connected equipment, that can involve inverter standards, grid connection requirements, anti-islanding testing, and local electrical rules. And those requirements can differ dramatically between countries. A plug fitting the socket does not make the installation legal. This sounds obvious, but it is one of the biggest traps in the entire category. A plug tells you that the physical connector fits. It does not tell you that the electrical system behind it is approved for bidirectional generation. That distinction is becoming particularly important in the UK. The UK's 2026 regulatory change is opening the door for qualifying plug-in solar PV systems connected through standard sockets, with the government framework specifying requirements including an 800 VA output limit and approved equipment. Importantly, the framework is for qualifying solar PV without battery storage, so you should not assume that the legalization of plug-in solar automatically means every plug-in battery system is legal in the same way. Germany has already gone much further in normalizing balcony solar, while France and other European markets have their own procedures and limits. The lesson is not that one country is safe and another is unsafe. The lesson is that the legal status belongs to the complete system and installation, not merely to the plug. What happens if you plug multiple units into the same circuit? This is where the simple plug-in concept starts becoming complicated. Imagine one plug-in solar system feeding 800 watts into a household circuit. Then imagine another system feeding another 800 watts into that same circuit. The fact that they are connected to two different sockets does not necessarily mean they are electrically isolated from one another. They may ultimately be connected to the same circuit protected by the same breaker, and that circuit already contains loads. This is why I have two sockets, so I can safely install two systems, is not a sufficient calculation. What happens if someone uses an extension cord or power strip? This is one of those things that looks completely harmless because we use extension cords every day. But a system that is approved for direct connection to a fixed socket is not automatically approved for connection through an extension lead or multi-way adapter. The additional connection introduces more variables: cable ratings, connection quality, contact resistance, overheating, and the possibility of someone plugging additional loads into the same arrangement. The current UK framework, for example, specifies direct connection requirements rather than treating a plug-in solar kit as something you can freely distribute through extension equipment. Does the normal breaker protect everything you think it protects? This is a more subtle version of the same problem. Household circuits were traditionally designed around electricity flowing from the distribution board towards loads. Distributed generation changes that picture. Now electricity can potentially enter the circuit somewhere downstream and flow in the opposite direction. That does not automatically mean the breaker stops working, but it does mean you need to understand what the protection device is actually protecting and how current can flow through the circuit under the particular installation arrangement. Is this actually going to save you money? Now we get to the comment that probably irritates manufacturers the most. Great. Free electricity. Except you can't afford to buy the system. There is a real economic argument hiding inside that comment. Solar electricity may be free once the equipment is installed. The equipment itself is not free, and the battery certainly is not free. So the calculation has to include the purchase price, delivery, installation, conversion losses, battery degradation, replacement costs, electricity prices, export compensation, and how frequently the battery actually cycles. A system can technically save money every day and still be a poor financial investment. Calculate the payback instead of repeating free electricity. Suppose you spend $1,500 on a system. If it saves you $1 per day on electricity, that is roughly $365 per year before accounting for degradation, maintenance, replacement, and financing. That gives you a simple theoretical payback of a little over 4 years. But real life is not a spreadsheet with perfect sunshine. You may not consume all the solar energy when it is generated. Your battery may not deliver every watt-hour you stored. Your electricity tariff may change. You may have low electricity consumption. You may move house before the system pays itself back. And eventually the battery will degrade. So the real question is not, how much electricity can this produce? It is, How much electricity that I would otherwise have bought from the grid can this system actually replace? And what does each replaced kilowatt-hour cost me? A battery can be financially bad and still be useful. This is an important distinction. Imagine a battery takes 8 years to pay for itself through electricity savings, but its warranty is shorter than that. Financially, that could be a terrible investment. But if you live somewhere with unreliable electricity, the same battery may be extremely valuable because you are not buying it solely to save money. You are buying backup. That makes it closer to insurance. And insurance is rarely judged purely by whether you made more money from it than you spent. The same product can therefore be a bad financial investment for one person and an excellent backup purchase for another. The bigger the appliance, the more expensive the backup becomes. This is where people can get trapped. A small battery can be fantastic for a router, laptop, phone chargers, and lights. Then someone says, but can it run my air conditioner? Technically, perhaps. Economically and practically, that is a completely different question. Air conditioners can consume hundreds or thousands of watts depending on the model and operating conditions, and startup behavior can make the inverter requirement even more demanding. If you want to run an air conditioner for several hours overnight, you need substantially more stored energy than if you simply want to keep your Wi-Fi router alive. That means a system that looks inexpensive when marketed as home backup can become very expensive once you define what home actually means. Your battery's usable capacity is what matters, not the number printed on the box. This is where battery specifications become deceptive without necessarily being dishonest. A battery advertised at 2000 Wh may have a different recommended usable capacity. The system may reserve part of the battery to protect longevity. Then you lose some energy during conversion. And the battery may not deliver exactly the same amount of energy after years of use. So when comparing two batteries, do not simply compare 2000 Wh versus 2400 Wh. Compare usable energy delivered to the load. Then compare how much the system costs. That gives you a much more meaningful number. Battery chemistry matters, but it is not the whole safety story. You will see a lot of products advertising LFP or lithium iron phosphate because it is attractive for stationary energy storage due to its thermal characteristics and cycle life potential. But chemistry is not a substitute for engineering. A badly designed battery management system does not become safe merely because the cells are LFP. Likewise, another lithium chemistry is not automatically dangerous simply because it has different characteristics. Look at the complete system: cell chemistry, battery management system, thermal management, enclosure, protection electronics, inverter, and certification. The battery cell is only one part of the machine. Who is this product actually for? And this may be the most important question of the entire video. Plug-in solar and plug-in batteries are not automatically good or bad technology. They solve particular problems. If you rent an apartment, have a balcony, cannot install rooftop solar, and have meaningful daytime electricity consumption, a small balcony solar system may make a lot of sense. If you want to keep your refrigerator, router, and workstation alive during outages, a properly specified battery may be extremely useful. If you want to power your entire house, including air conditioning, electric cooking, pumps, and other heavy loads, a little plug-in battery may be completely the wrong tool. And if your primary goal is financial payback, you need to calculate the numbers rather than assuming that every stored kilowatt-hour is automatically worth buying. In some cases, a properly installed hybrid inverter and larger home battery will be more appropriate. In other cases, that system may be excessive for what the homeowner actually needs. The technology is not the decision.